Hello, everyone. It is a 2 o'clock start, but we know that higher education time runs a little bit behind as you go from one meeting to the other. So we'll probably be starting around 2:02 in about 2 minutes. Again, thanks to all of you who are choosing to attend live. I like a live webinar, Scott and Chris. Anything can go wrong. Dog can bark, cats can run in. See, look at 2 o'clock, and the numbers are just everyone's logging on from one meeting to another in higher ed.
Especially when you work remote, Jeff, things can always go crazy.
Dogs, cats, kittens, I love it all. Brings in some humanity.
It's usually the Amazon delivery man here.
And
usually the dogs for me, but mine are my door shut.
Hello, everyone. Folks are logging in. We're going to start at 2:02. We're really excited to have you with us. Thanks. You know, I had a college professor tell me that I have a face for radio. And that's hilarious. I tell tour guides that now, and they're like appalled. And I'm like, it was the 80s. There weren't a lot of choices. And he was kind of right. Don't put that mug on TV. So now that's why I just love inserting myself into webinars now. Chris and Scott, 2:02, we got about 140 participants. Are we ready to talk sales?
Let's go.
Let's do it. Good afternoon and good morning to all of you, especially those of you out. Good morning out on the West Coast. I am Jeff Calais, Senior Vice President of Enrollment Consulting at Echo Delta, and your webinar host today. Thank you for joining us for this live webinar. It's a lot of S's. Sales Summer School for senior, seasoned, and starting admissions professionals, presented by your campus partner in higher education marketing consulting, Echo Delta. Over 300 of you smart admissions overachievers seem to like summer school and sales and registered for this webinar. Some of you synchronous and some of you asynchronous. Now, let's talk about our agenda. One of the things we do with enrollment campus visit consulting is always train tour guides to set the expectations. Where are we going to be walking? Where are we not going to be walking? And how long it's going to take. We promised you a goal of a 50-minute webinar. So after some introductions about the panelists and Echo Delta, we're going to turn it over to Chris and Scott, who are the experts on this, who will dive into the content that you've come here for today. Now, about that content, we can't render a day's workshop, a sales workshop, into this 50-minute webinar. So Chris and Scott are going to really focus on the important things that y'all need to know right now. So I'll be monitoring the Q&A along the way, and thanks to those of you who submitted questions in advance when you registered. We're going to attempt to have 15 to 20 minutes to field all your questions. You'll also receive a post-webinar email of how to access this recording and the slide deck. So enough about managing expectations. Let me introduce you to my fellow panelists today, Chris and Scott. Now, what we all have in common, I believe, gentlemen, we were all born in Western Pennsylvania, which makes us Yenzers and Steelers fans. And like most of you on this webinar today, we have worked on campuses where you need to recruit, where tuition revenue and enrollment matter. So that's why we're in sales. Scott is also Senior Vice President of Enrollment Consulting at Echo Delta. He's a graduate of Indiana University of Pennsylvania with a graduate degree from Duquesne University. He has a robust resume and experience that is a mix of both private and public universities. And he launched Florida Polytechnic University from a construction site into the thriving university it is today before joining Echo Delta and leading enrollment consulting. Chris Lewis is our higher education consultant at Echo Delta, and he's a graduate of California University of Pennsylvania. You both are Pesci graduates. That's awesome. And he holds a master's degree from the University of Pittsburgh. Chris has a great career mix of both higher education and Fortune 500 companies. So he has that perfect blend to lead our on-campus sales workshops and to lead the majority of the content in today's webinar. Again, I'm Jeff Calais, Senior Vice President Enrollment Consulting at Echo Delta. I started my career way back in my alma mater in 1986, Lee College, and I've had the joy of leading campus visit consulting at TargetX, Render Experiences, R&L Render, and now at Echo Delta. Speaking of Echo Delta, we are the higher education division of a nearly over three decade old marketing firm called CNP. CNP has helped a lot of for-profit with their marketing goals, and Echo Delta has helped many schools with their enrollment goals in both marketing and consulting. So, and we offer a depth of both agency and consulting. And to the point of sales, one of the things that we heard, and Scott, you can go ahead and advance, is that, listen to what your clients are saying and they'll tell you what they need. So in our work in enrollment on campuses over the last 2 years, we heard many of you say, hey, do you do sales training? Do you know someone who does do sales training? And so we created it and launched it, and Chris is heading it up. And we are giving you a part of that today. And again, we can't render all of that in this amount of time, but we're going to hit the highlights and take your questions. Let's talk about that word sales. I'm a salesman. I'm proud of it, Scott and Chris. I know you are too. And hey, higher education is a big business, probably a $40 billion a year enterprise in the enrollment side of higher ed. Private equity, venture capital, mergers and acquisitions have all come into our space. As Eric Hoover, the Chronicle of Higher Education, called it the Great Industrial Missions Complex, or the NACAC Exhibit Hall. Visit it and you'll get how big of a business this is. Oh, and by the way, if you're in Los Angeles, come by exhibit number 1015 and chat with us. You're on this webinar today because sales is no longer a taboo or bad word. You are not Vinny, the used car salesman, trying to put someone in a car today. You are trusted advisors that connect with best fit students on a course that can change their lives, their families, the country, and the world. You all are admissions overachievers who seem to like summer school and sales, and we hope today's webinar will ignite a love for sales. As Eric Lee Mills at our client Bowling Green University shared in an email about this webinar, love the sales approach. Sales is taboo no more. Now, research shows when we experience something, we can only remember 3 things. The 3 things that we want you to take away from this webinar are: number 1, listen to students' concerns with resilience and empathy. Number 2, turn negative perceptions into positive attributes. Number 3, stay calm and collected, facing tough questions and objections. So that's our setup. We are ready to dive into the content that you've come here for today. So Scott, we all face those objections.
Yes,
Start us off talking about it, if you would, please, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. But before we talk about some of the most common objections, Jeff, let's talk about some recent research impacting college choice today. Actually, it just came out today, and I added this slide at the last minute because I thought it was very relevant. The Gallup and Luma Foundation found that 32% of adults have very little or no confidence in higher education, up from 23% of respondents who said the same time last year. Meanwhile, the share of adults who reported strong confidence in higher education dipped from 36% down to 32% in 2024. And that's been on a downward path since 2015, when it was at 57. Another interesting point is that the sharpest changes are among Republicans. Respondents with low faith in colleges frequently cited their belief that institutions are attempting to indoctrinate students, and they are failing to teach students relevant skills and often leaving graduates struggling to find jobs. So some really great research out there and some of the things that we are facing. The next research I want to take a look at before we dive in is on why students choose a college. It's important to understand why students are overcoming objections and picking the institution of a choice. A recent survey of 100,000 American high school students by EduVentures provides additional insight into the biggest factors behind college choice for students. If you look at this chart, 80% of students surveyed pointed to the top 7 reasons behind their final decisions. At top of that list is affordability. It's been there for a long year, almost a decade now. Desired program, career outcomes, reputation, and academic quality, value, proximity to home, and of course, the elusive fit. I think most of you will find these 7 at your institution as well. Okay, let's look at some most common objections. At Echo Delta, we have been interviewing students on how they make their college decision for years. We've heard a lot of concerns and objections over the years. There are 2, though, that are becoming harder and harder to change when it comes to a student's mindset. I'll talk about those later, but for now, I'm sure you are hearing things like, it's too expensive, it's too far, it's too close, there's nothing to do, or the food just sucks. You can pretty much guarantee there's going to be something. Believe it or not, objections are actually a good thing. It's important to remember the fact a lot of young people are nervous to tell you what they don't like about your school. And it becomes crucial for you to try to uncover potential objections sooner than later. Bottom line, don't assume the student doesn't have an objection or concern related to your institution or your student experience. It's your job to pull out, and you need to do it as early as possible. Please don't sit back and wait. Dig until you find everything. Okay, let's take a look at the top 5 common objections. First, cost and financial aid concerns. Wow, I can't imagine what it's like to sit in your shoes right now with a FAFSA meltdown. Kudos to you guys for enduring that. But one thing that I think you do need to remember here is that every student is different. You're dealing with students for first-gen, Pell eligible, affluent families. And believe it or not, the affluent families can quite often be the most difficult ones. They have been coached and they are locked and loaded and ready to ask for a discount. Second, doubts about program fit. If you don't offer the degree that they're interested in, this could be a huge challenge and often a tough thing to overcome. Third is concerns about campus life. Are there things to do? Are you too far away from home? Are you too close? What type of facilities you have? As you can see, that a lot of these things correlate with why they choose an institution. Fourth, anxiety about the admissions process. Do they have the grades or test scores that they need to get in? Do I have to write an essay? Do I have to come for an interview? These things all cause a lot of anxiety for college students. Finally, our favorite one, relationships. They are complicated. Breakups, boyfriends, girlfriends, health issues among parents, grandparents. The list goes on. Okay, let's just talk about 2 of the biggest red flags that we can face. Oops. One key thing to remember when you're dealing with these 2 red flags is that students make decisions on a college of choice. It's an emotional decision. There's logical things to back it up, but ultimately they make their choice based on how they feel. When you're looking at red flags, look no further than these 2. If your school doesn't have their major, that can be a major red flag. At most schools, there's specific popular majors, 2 or 3, that are not available to students. Engineering, nursing, computer science are some of the most common ones that not every school provides. If your school doesn't have one of these and a student is interested in your institution, that could definitely be a red flag for you. The next key step when you run into that situation is give some kind of response. Why did you choose that? And a lot of times you're going to get a little pushback. Oh, it sounded kind of cool. I can make a lot of money. I've heard things like that time and time again. There you have a window of opportunity because then you can overcome that. And you might find a major at your institution that could work. However, one thing that I have done over the years and has been a huge success is to help that student find that institution that fits them best. Just like Jeff said, become a trusted advisor. Point them into the right direction to a school that has their major and where they would be a good fit. I have done this at all my schools and it's paid large dividends for my teams by building trust. I've actually had school guidance counselors bring students to my tables and my counselors, or fill the room at high school visits because they've heard my counselors or they've heard me helping their students find right fit. I've actually had parents bring their children, other children, back to my table years later because I helped their other child in the past. Try it. I'm sure that you'll experience the same thing in finding those right fit students and growing your institution's trust. The second red flag that your school is too far from home. This can be a hard one because family members, boyfriends, girlfriends will make it hard to overcome. In most cases, if you convince them to attend, quite often they'll end up transferring out. This will cause resentment due to extra costs and time for that student. Now, let's talk about how to handle objections. And for that, I'll turn it over to Chris, our lead sales training consultant for our sales training here at Echo Delta.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. So we're going to talk about how to handle objections. The first thing I want to say about objections is objections are buying signals. They truly are. If they are objecting, that means they care enough, they're interested enough to ask questions, they care enough about your institution that they're really thinking about it, but they want to make sure, hey, is this the right fit? So objections are buying signals. Let me repeat that again. So the things we're going to cover are probing. How did you do? Listen to learn. You want to let them talk. Show empathy and validation. Acknowledge concerns and build trust. I do want to echo what Scott said and what Jeff said about being a trusted advisor. It is really, we use the word sales, but when people would ask me what kind of salesperson I was, I would always say, and I do always say, I'm a relationship salesman. I'm about building relationships and maintaining relationships. We're going to talk about understanding the objection, the what, where, and why. Problem solving, offering concrete solutions using facts and examples, and then talk about moving on. After we're done handling the objection, we move on. I want you to keep in mind, there are a certain number of students that are going to attend your college no matter what you do. Maybe both mom and dad attended your college and are proud graduates. Maybe grandma or grandpa's on the board of trustees at the school. Those, is to use the phrase Scott said, they're locked and loaded, they're ready to go. They're wearing your sweatshirt to their initial visit. There are also a whole sector of students who are not going to attend your college no matter what you do. Maybe it's the University of Pittsburgh and they walk into your school, you're down the street from the University of Pittsburgh, they're wearing their Pitt sweatshirt, mom and dad have attended, they're locked and loaded there. You're probably not going to get that kid, and that's okay. What we want to focus on is all this vast majority of students between the ones that are going to attend no matter what and the ones that aren't going to attend no matter what. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where you are going to find the students that are going to either meet or exceed your admissions goals as an individual, as an admissions team, and as an institution. Over the many years I worked in college admissions, I've met with thousands of prospective students and their parents. I've also met with grandparents, aunts and uncles, screaming siblings, discerning family friends, and of course, as we all know, the dreaded boyfriend or girlfriend. Nobody wants to go to college and leave Pookie Bear behind, but they will. But the good news in all this, if you take the proper skills, which we're going to talk about, and you practice and hone your skills, the handling of objections is going to become like breathing to you, as it did for me. We go through our days all day, every day, and we breathe and we never even think about it. If you can master handling objections, that is how you will go through these situations. We're not going to make your conversion rate 100%. We know that's never, ever going to happen. What we do hope to do is to create more opportunities for you to help students and guide them through the process of hopefully becoming students at your institution. Helping students achieve their dream is hopefully what you're passionate about and exactly why you do what you do. Also, I do want to touch on that we are salespeople. Don't shy away from that. I've never shied away from that. But be a relationship salesperson. Be that trusted advisor. Create that relationship. Create the bond. I still have people that I helped years ago contact me and reach out just to let me know how they're doing. That's a relationship. So let's talk about how to handle objections. So objections are going to happen. Next slide, please. Objections are going to happen. Rarely have I ever recruited a student, besides those few that are going to come no matter what. Rarely have I ever encountered somebody who just had no objections, no questions, everything was great, and we moved on. But the preparation for you handling objections actually starts way before the objection actually comes up. It starts in your probing. That's why the first part of this was, how'd you do in your probe? When I went into any meeting, I had a specific list of questions, very specific questions that I wanted the answer to. And every conversation I had, every question I asked had a reason. You are trying to gather as much information. This might be the one and only time you have them in front of you. So you want to gather as much information as possible. The other thing I always did is I always let people know that I was taking notes as they were talking. And I let them know that the reason I was doing that is I wanted to make sure that I knew exactly what they wanted, how they wanted it, what they were interested in, and I cared enough to jot all that stuff down. What I'm also doing, though, is preparing to handle objections by having answers to the questions, by asking specific questions. When those objections come up, you actually have a lot of the answers right in front of you, and you can also be able to recall and read back to them what they said. So probing is actually a really integral part of the process. When you're actively listening and taking good notes, then you're preparing to handle these objections. Now, you also want to be paying specific attention to nonverbal and verbal cues. Be picking up on their voice tone, their inflection. People get excited and they smile when they're talking about things that interest them. Take note of that. Are they putting their head down? Are they frowning? All this stuff, you're gathering constantly all this information and preparing so that when objections come up, you're ready. Now, maybe mom or dad was cutting them off. Maybe as you ask questions, make sure see if they're smiling, see if they're frowning. Take note of what's going on with them. Next slide. So we want to listen to students' concerns with resilience and empathy. We want to listen to learn and not to respond. Way too often today, all of us, not just in admissions, but everybody, when we're having a conversation, we tend to be thinking as they're talking, how am I going to rebut? What am I going to say? Sometimes we even cut them off. Don't do that. That's the biggest disservice you can do to them. What a huge mistake that is. If you're hoping to respond to them intelligently and effectively, then you have to be really listening in the first place. Again, take in, let them finish. Let them say everything they want to say. So instead of cutting them off, and instead of, and a part of listening to learn is I want you to be smiling. I want you to be leaning forward, sit up, and I want you to be nodding in agreement. I want you to let them know, yeah, I understand where you're coming from. I hear what you're saying. I went through a similar thing. That puts them at ease. This shows you care about what they have to say and that you're listening to them. Very important. As you're listening and as they're giving their objection, don't assume this is the same objection you've heard 1,000 times. Don't automatically cut them off and give a response. You might be totally off base. You also might be opening the door to an objection that they didn't even think about. So truly listen. It could be a whole new objection brought to you in a totally different light. So don't assume. Let them finish. If you cut them off, if you're answering before they're done, that can it can ruin your relationship. It can ruin the rapport that you've built up until now. And that's a fickle thing. Again, this is about building relationships. And just like with personal relationships, once that relationship's ruined, it's certainly hard to come back from that. Next, I want you to confirm and acknowledge. Confirm what they're saying. Acknowledge what they're saying. Use reflective statements. Use open and closed-ended questions. Open-ended questions are things like, what are you looking for in a school? Or closed-ended question, how are you planning on paying for school? Make sure you're confirming and acknowledging what they're saying. Dig deep, or as we say, peel back the onion. Keep going deeper and deeper. You really want to get to what the root of the problem is if you're going to solve the problem. So keep asking questions. Use statements like, I hear what you're saying. I understand where you're coming from. I'm hearing you say you're worried about being homesick. Is that correct? Actually ask them and they'll say, yeah, that's exactly correct. If it's appropriate and it's true, share your own personal experience. As an example, I remember how scared I was to leave home and go to college. However, my college, just like here at ABC College, The very first week of school, we had a lot of activities in the dorms. We had a lot of activities on campus. And I was able to meet a lot of people. I was able to get involved in activities that I was interested in. And because of that, school immediately felt like home. It really put me at ease. Do you think that would help you feel better about coming to school? Well, yeah, it would. Objection overcome. Now, remember back when you spent time asking specific probing questions and you were gathering all that information? Now's the time when that comes into play. Now's the time when you put bullets in your gun, so to speak, by having all that information so that when these objections come up, you are ready. But I want to take a step back and I want to say, when objections come up, as far as staying calm and collected, don't get angry. There's no reason to get angry. Sometimes you're going to have contentious conversations. I've been yelled at thousands of times. And the thing that took me a while to realize, and I want you guys to realize, is almost never is it your fault. It might just be the circumstance. It might be what's going on at home. So just listen. Listen with empathy. Listen with resilience. Be open and just simply smile, not to make them more bad. Smile because you care. Let them let the air out of their balloon. It will work wonders. And there's no reason to be angry because, again, it's not your fault. So don't internalize it. It's just going to ruin the relationship. Next, we want to explore the what, the where, and the why. What? I want you to find out as much as information as they will give up. And as Scott said, you may have to kind of beat the drum and continue to ask questions. Find out exactly what the objection is. You may have to continue to probe and dig deeper and deeper. Again, use reflective statements. Repeat back to them what they said. Make sure you're summarizing what they're saying and confirming that what they're saying is actually what they mean. Find out the where and the why. Find out where the objection's coming from. Maybe they heard something secondhand from a friend. Maybe their aunt or uncle attended your university 25 or 30 years ago, and they're informing them about your school. Well, we know college life has changed immensely over the last 5 years, let alone 25 or 30 years. So maybe that's where it's coming from. Are they repeating what mom or dad thinks? Is boyfriend or girlfriend, literally or figuratively, in their ear? Did they read an article? Maybe they visited another school and that school is trashing your school. Believe it or not, that happens. It's very sad. Don't feed into it. Don't return serve. But it happens. Make sure you are fully understand what they're saying, and really, just as important, figure out if it's even an objection. They may think it's an objection. You may think it's an objection. It's not even an objection. Maybe they zoned out. Maybe mom or dad was talking. Maybe they simply forgot something you said. Maybe the objection's about money and they were diddling on their phone when mom and dad said, hey, Chris, grandma and grandpa have been saving for the last 18 years and they're going to largely pay for Janie or Johnny's education. This is actually happening on a much more frequent basis. So once we've gathered this information, once we've really gotten down to what the problem is, we can look to turn those negative perceptions into positive outcomes. Next slide, please. Next one. So once you fully understand the what, where, and why the objection, now's the time for you to respond. Maybe you have to go back and re-explain something. Maybe you have to introduce new information based on their objection. You might have to remind them of something earlier that they said earlier today. For instance, as Scott said, a lot of students don't want to go far from home. They don't want to leave home. So a lot of times in my notes, one of the first things out of somebody's mouth, they would say, man, Chris, I can't wait to get out of my small town. So when the objection comes up that I really don't want to leave home, I'm scared to go far away from school, I'll just gently remind them, hey, remember, you said, not Chris said, Johnny or Janie said, hey, I really want to get out of my small town. Objection, they actually handled their own objection. How great is that? If it's an objection to do with a statistic, a class, an activity, Try to have concrete facts. Try to have something to give them, something that you can cite. If students are talking about, hey, I'm really concerned there's nothing to do around here, or I really like Indian food and there's no Indian restaurants, you should have a running list of all the activities on your campus and everything around your campus so that you can actually provide proof to them. Hey, I knew you were concerned about things to go to school. Here's 100 different things you can do in our area that are within a half an hour of campus. So how awesome is that? Make sure you have information to give them if at all possible. And again, if it's possible, when appropriate, share your own story. Maybe you share the story of a fellow colleague. Maybe the fellow colleague sees you on your tour, or maybe the fellow colleague happens to be in the office next door. Take 2 minutes if the colleague's open to it. Walk them over there. Have them talk to somebody who went through the same thing they did. People respond and people love to know that they are not the only person going through something. So if you can show that even in print or let them talk to somebody, that will go a long way to help handling their objection. Extremely important when you're handling objections. Don't lie or bend the truth. If you don't know, say you don't know. It's perfectly okay not to know. It really is. Instead, say, hey, listen, I'm not sure about that. Let me find out and I will get back to you. How about I get back to you by tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock? And then most importantly, follow through. Do what you say you're going to do. If you lie even a little bit, that can totally ruin any credibility and ruin any rapport and positive vibes that you've got with that family. It can ruin the trust that you've worked so hard to build. So be open, honest, and be clear and confident in your response. Remember, you are the expert and you're here to guide them through the process of figuring out if your school is the right school for them. So whether it's a negative perception about your school, your class offering, your staff, the surrounding area, financial aid fears, leaving home, if you handle things in a cool, caring, confident manner, you can help turn those negative perceptions into positive outcomes. Show them and their family how college can be affordable. Walk them through all the college experience can set them up for the rest of their life. Ease their fears about making the decision to leave home. So moving on, once you're sure you've handled the objection, that they understand, they're satisfied, and they're ready to move on, then it's okay to move on. But wait, maybe as they say, yeah, I'm ready to move on, or sure, okay, Chris, that's not ready to move on. If you have to stop, if you have to go back, it is perfectly okay, especially if this is your first and only face-to-face visit. You do not want them to leave without getting their objections or getting their questions answered, and let them know, hey, it's perfectly okay if there's something you don't understand, something I need to repeat, it's perfectly okay. Let them know you're here to help them in any way you possibly can. That will go a long way. You may have to repeat this process over and over until all objections at this time have been handled. Once you, the prospective student, and their family are all satisfied that questions have been answered, objections have been handled, then it's time to move on. Then it's time to close them on whatever the next step is. Maybe that's finishing your application. Maybe it's going through financial aid. Maybe it's the week of classes and it's, hey, go finish packing. I'll see you tomorrow on campus. Whatever it is, move on to the next step. If there's hesitation with going to the next step, then you may not have handled the objection and you may have to reel back a bit and go through it. It's perfectly okay. This is not going to be the only time you're going to handle their objections. They may come up anytime from the first visit until the first week of school. But if you handle them in a caring, confident, and calm manner, then you're doing a great service to your prospective student, yourself, and your college. So, next slide. So treat objections as buying signals. If you're confident, prepared, and you speak truthfully, that is exactly what they are. You will welcome them. So we are going to talk about just a few other key takeaways before I hand it off to Jeff.
That is some festive summer sales school imagery on your slide, Chris.
Indeed. I want to hop in the middle of that thing. Next slide, please, Scott. So the admissions process is about having real conversations. Create relationships with your people. It will really go a long way. Understand their concerns. Listen to learn. Really internalize what they're saying. Be that positive, strong advocate for them. And respond authentically. The best thing you can do, I'm telling you, if you were just open and honest and you're passionate and you care, you're going to win some and you lose some, but you will win more than you lose if you practice handling objections and you are authentic in what you do. So I'll pass it back over to Jeff.
Thank you, Chris. Hey, another fun. So I feel like I'm at a concert passing that beach ball around. Wow, Chris. So I was doing what you said to do and taking notes in my Georgia Southern notepad, Amy and team. Chris and I will see you soon. And, you know, for me, what I heard that's big takeaways are objections are a good thing. Listen to learn, not to respond. If you've ever hung out with me, you know I'm guilty of cutting you off. And that is my big takeaway from this, Chris. And it's not your fault. I think all purchasing is emotional, and there's a lot of emotions going on in that prospective family dynamic. And I think what you really truly said is what Brian Niles, co-founder of TargetX, taught me: people recruit people. And you really hit home with that today. Great stuff. Thank you so much, Chris. So we're going to get to your questions, and right before we do, we know you all are those overachieving admission salespeople, and we have some resources for you that many of you may have seen. Scott, if we can go ahead. When you registered at echodelta.co, I like the joke. I don't know what happened to the M, but we have a great blog that's out there in our insights, and a podcast hosted by Jarrett Smith, the Higher Ed Marketing Lab. And we just published the Politics and the College Choice: How Students' Political Views Influence Where They Enroll. We know on campus visits, we often hear about the politics of a campus. So you'll want to download that report as well. All of this is available right on our homepage at echodelta.co. And that takes us to some Q and oh no, wait, you know, it's summer. So every summer school needs a summer reading list. And here are Chris and Scott's top picks for you. Rejection Proof, The Little Red Book of Selling. That's one of my favorites. And Life's a Pitch. Then you buy. Chris, do you have a favorite in here that you recommended? If we were just going to do one at the pool, the lake, the beach.
I just read Rejection Proof. I cannot recommend it enough. It's interesting that the guy in it basically goes out and tries to make himself be rejected. And one of the big things that I say to all admissions people is a really key part of being a successful admissions person is becoming comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's what that guy did. And that will take you far if you can become comfortable being uncomfortable. So that's my pick.
Additional great advice. Scott Rhodes, do you have a favorite or a rec?
Yeah, definitely The Little Red Book of Sales. I actually used that book with all of my teams. We'd actually break up the chapters and have the team present on that. And they loved the book, and it was a great tool for me.
For your team. And if you travel with Scott Rhodes, Chris, he's working on being rejection proof, taught by our good friend Jim Gilmore. And at a restaurant, he'll ask for a refill of steak. Free refills, right? And the rejection that comes out of that. So there's your reading list for the pool, the beach, the mountains, and the lake. All right. We are at 2:39. And again, our 3 takeaways of this webinar that we hope you're taking away in the big 30,000 foot. Number 1, listens to students' concerns with resilience and empathy. We need that more and more. Number 2, turn negative perceptions into positive attributes. And number 3, stay calm and collected, facing tough questions and objections. Right now, we would like to, I love these summer graphics. It makes me just want to go to a pool down here in the South. We want to hear from you. Some of you submitted questions. If you have questions, please type them into the Q&A now, and Scott and Chris will take them live. Also, if you want to further the conversation and meet with Scott at NACAC at booth exhibit 1015, but you can book a call with Scott, and you can dive into more into the sales training, that brings Chris and Scott and I in different combos to your campus. We'll leave those QR codes up during our Q&A. We did get some questions in advance, guys. So let's turn into one of those. We heard from Angela at Arizona Christian. How can enrollment advisor overcome an objective when the university may not be a student's second choice? I'm just going to toss it out to both of you.
Sure. Again, it's okay to be a second choice. It's about as far as overcoming it, I think you begin to build value. If you build that relationship, you find out what things that you have in common with that school, and drive those home. Also find out the things that they are looking for that is specific to your school. And don't shy away from things that you don't offer. Accentuate what you do. Build relationship. Handle those objections. You can certainly. It's okay to be. And you never know what's going to happen. Their financially could fall through at the other school, as we know. That's what's going on right now. But just hang in there. Just because you're their second choice doesn't mean that you're not a choice. You are. Continue to work with them. You'll reap major rewards by building that rapport, building a relationship, staying in contact, and being a trusted advisor.
So Libby asked in the Q&A chat, could focusing on objections make the meeting too negative? Because students go by feeling, that emotions. How can we make sure pulling out objectives stays a positive experience?
Sure.
Great question.
Yeah, great question. Thank you so much. You're responding to them. You're not trying to you're not bringing up objections. You're going off of what they're saying. And when we talk about the term of objection, I don't want you to think it in terms of it's not like you're watching Suits and Harvey Specter yells out, "I object." It's not like that. They're really just questions. Again, they're buying signals. It's not negative. If they say, "Hey, really, I'm interested in smaller classes," find out what smaller classes means to them. Maybe they came from a high school that only has 10 students in a class. That's small. Maybe they came from a high school that's got 30 or 40 students in a class, and your average class size is 50. Well, that's right in their range. So you're really just responding to what they're saying and answering questions. Don't think of objection as being a negative thing. It's really not.
And in a follow-up, Libby asked if you're meeting with a rising junior in a follow-up and there's no clear step, how do you make a clear step? And is that too early?
No, I've actually met with sophomores before. I do think that's a little early. If you're meeting with juniors, I see more and more people now making that college decision. No, it's not too early. I see them really making the decision earlier and earlier in their senior year. I think you let them know when it is have knowledge and understanding of when your application is coming out. Keep in contact with them. Another part of the probe, and this is how you stay in contact. I always ask students as part of my probe, "Hey, what sports are you involved in? What activities are you involved in?" And again, everything's got a reason. So what I would do is, when's your birthday? I send birthday cards. I might send them a text or an email. Hey, how did your game go? And so then once you built that relationship, then when it's time to complete the application, hey, it's time to complete your application. Let me help walk you through it.
Those great questions get them talking and listen to what they're saying. To that point of timing, Sean Marshall tossed out we've got both chat and Q&A. I love it. At this point in the admissions funnel, many applicants have already made their decisions for the upcoming fall semester, but there are still some decided. So I think we're looking for some quick tips this summer that might help out for schools with rolling or open admissions. Some quick techniques, either one of you graduate, to get them on the phone if they're still not committed. It's been a heck of a enrollment cycle with FAFSA fallout.
Hopefully, and this goes back to the first meeting, which we talk a lot in our one-day training. We talk a lot about it. Hopefully, you know already what the best way to get a hold of them is. Hopefully you found out early on in your conversation, what's the best way to get a hold of you? I know a lot of The Gen Zers and the younger folks, it's texting, maybe it's emailing. Grandma and grandpa are going to certainly want a firm handshake and a phone call. Find out, meet them where they are, and just keep, maybe you send them an article about what they're interested in. Keep on their radar in a fun, very non-intrusive, interesting way. Again, if you built that relationship and that rapport, then they're just hearing from a friend. They're hearing from someone they know who's offering them advice or letting them. Believe me, most people aren't out there doing that. So if you are, it's going to go a long way.
We have a question in the chat about navigating conversations if students are insistent on a gap year before attending. I know the gap year is big in Europe and other parts of the world, not so much in the United States, but I understand why students would want to take a gap year.
Yeah, students do sometimes. My big question to that is, where's that? What, where, and why?
What do during that year, right?
Right. What are you going to do in that year? What's your plan statistically? And you can show them statistics on this. Statistically, people who do a gap year, they keep gapping. They don't end up going to school. So just let them know that. Let them know, hey, if that's really what you want, but show them the advantages of starting school now. Again, what, where, why? What is the objection? Where is it coming from? Why is it an objection? Why do you want to take a gap year? What's the benefit? What are you planning on doing?
That can really lead to them channeling the why, which would maybe connect them more robustly to your culture after that 1 year, right? Don't keep gapping. That's great.
If they really ultimately at the end of the day, if they're going to take a gap year, that's okay. Again, we're trying to increase our batting average. We know we're not going to hit 1,000, but we're trying to just get up to the plate as many times as possible and give ourselves opportunities. So it's all about building relationships, staying in contact. But yeah, find out the what, where, why.
Audrey from Furman asked, what's your best advice on selling a school that you did not attend? I had a vice president once tell me she keeps her admissions team 50% alum graduates and 50% non-alum. And she said, graduates bring the heart and non-graduates bring the brains. And I like to say, Chris and Scott, I mean, I get that mix. I get what they're talking about there. Like, I work for my alum, and I think in many ways it over biases you. I think not attending your school could be a really good thing because you bring a very somewhat less emotional attachment to this, and you've studied it. And I also think once you graduate, you lose all street cred. You're an admissions professional, and yes, you do have those shared experiences. But Chris or Scott, any take on that? Because you both have recruited for schools that weren't your alma maters.
I agree with you, Jeff. You bring a much different perspective that is very helpful as a trusted advisor to a student, and that perspective is trusted on a different level, I think, actually, to the students, because they can tell that your heart is not leading, that you're leading with an intelligent point.
It's turning a negative into a positive, isn't it?
Absolutely. And to add on to what Scott said, personally, I recruited thousands of students, and I never recruited one student for either of the universities that I attended, and that's perfectly okay. What I did do was I became an expert, and I got to know all the ins and outs of the school that I was representing. And I think it's incredibly important to truly believe in what your school is doing and truly believe in what you are doing as a admissions person, which is helping people achieve their dreams. If that's what you're there for and you're passionate about it, that will shine through regardless of whether you are an alumni of that school or not.
As a first-gen graduate, and my cousin Madison, who works at Pitt, is on the line, and she's a first-gen graduate. I think that dream part, that aspiration of American higher education is a great thing. We are approaching time, and one of you did ask what's involved in this one-day sales training. Honestly, we're not bringing this up as a sales pitch on our sales webinar. You can, of course, scan that QR code and get the details. But Chris, 10 seconds, quick pitch. I know that it is all about leveling up, and along with the 1 day, you provide coaching options for the year after, but happening.
So we come in and spend an entire day with your staff, and we go soup to nuts through the admissions process. Certainly, we touch on handling objections. We touch on all aspects of the process, from designing your follow-up, seeing where your struggles are, identifying areas for improvement. So we really go through, we look at the sales process of admissions holistically and break down each part and kind of walk you through exactly what to do to make yourself more successful.
And it levels up, and then you also have coaching options for the follow-up that our clients have just said great things about. And again, Scott is ready to answer those questions if you want to book a call with him or scan that QR code to take a look at the offering. Gentlemen, we are at 2:50, and I want to thank you both. I've had fun. We hope all of you overachieving admissions trusted advisors have had fun and have your own takeaways that will help you during this chaos time of enrollment, but you can do this. I personally, and Scott and Chris, want to thank everyone at Echo Delta who helped produce this, especially Alex, Rachel, Tiffany, Morgan, and Natalie. The graphics are great. The marketing was great. You made us look great. And we are so thankful to be your colleagues. We wanted to thank you for attending. We hope that you have a really great summer and enjoy the rest of it and really feel prepared. You're going to buy those books or share those books with each other and are prepared for this upcoming sales cycle. I think we've got another fun summer graphic, Scott, as we say thank you and goodbye. You will be getting an email, and we look forward with follow-up on how to download the recording and the deck as well. This has been Summer Sales School for senior, seasoned, and starting admissions professional. For Scott Rhodes and Chris Lewis and everyone at Echo Delta, we thank you very much and wish you the best of the rest of your summer.
Thanks, everyone.